you like me now? How you like me now? How you like me now? Did you like that? Did you like that? Did you like the Clark show, baby? Did you like the Clark show that she put on in Chicago? Any and everybody can get it. Was that white privilege? Well, wait a minute, DIJONAI Carrington. Was that white privilege? 37 points. Was that white privilege? 10 assists, 37 point, 10 assists, double-double. Was that a white privilege double-double? Was that 8 3-pointers? Right in your eyes.
Gotta highlight that, but she wants everyone to know it's not why she plays. She's trying to, deep from like Michigan.
Caitlin Clark just delivered a performance that has everyone talking, putting up 37 points and completely taking over the game. Once again, the spotlight is on Clark and DIJONAI Carrington. But what really happened during the game? And did Carrington actually storm out following Clark's explosive performance? Let's jump straight into today's video and break it all down. 37 points, just let that number sink in. When Caitlin Clark puts together a performance like this, the conversation around the WNBA changes instantly. And this time, it wasn't just about the points. It was about the pressure, the matchup, the intensity, and, of course, DIJONAI Carrington. On top of that, a completely different controversy involving the WNBA suddenly drew even more attention to the game. What happened next had fans talking everywhere. Some called it a statement performance, while others saw it as another chapter in the growing Caitlin Clark versus the world conversation. But here's what makes this story so interesting. Was this really Caitlin Clark humbling Carrington, or was something much bigger happening on the court? Because once you look beyond the headline, the story becomes far more complicated. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why this particular performance sparked so much discussion.
Carrington, you put 823 on X like that was going to be some big day for you. It was a day for you to get embarrassed by the GOAT Caitlin Clark again. Caitlin and Kelsey combined for 67 points.
Caitlin and Kelsey combined for 67 points. But Caitlin Clark doesn't really get normal basketball games anymore. Every game comes with expectations. Every shot gets analyzed, every missed shot gets clipped, every confrontation becomes a debate, and every big performance becomes a headline. That's the reality of being one of the most talked about players in women's basketball. Imagine walking into a game knowing that millions of people aren't simply watching the score, they're watching how you respond to pressure, your body language, your matchup, and the one moment that could change the entire conversation. That's why a 37-point performance carries so much weight. Scoring 37 points isn't simply about putting numbers on the scoreboard. It's about taking control of the narrative. And that's where DIJONAI Carrington enters the story. Whenever Clark and Carrington are involved in the same conversation, fans immediately pay attention because their previous interactions have already generated enormous discussion. Carrington is known for her physical, competitive defensive style, while Clark has spent much of her professional career dealing with intense defensive attention. Great offensive players are going to be targeted, pressured, and forced into uncomfortable situations, and Clark has certainly experienced that. But instead of allowing the physicality or attention to completely change her game, she keeps finding ways to create offense. Sometimes it's through three-point shooting, sometimes in transition, sometimes through passing, and when the defense gives her an opening, she attacks. On this particular night, the scoring exploded, 37 points. That kind of number immediately changes the tone of a game. Every possession feels more important, defensive adjustments matter more, and every mistake gets magnified. Let's put 37 points into perspective. You can't simply call that a good game. It's a major offensive performance because reaching that total requires consistency, multiple scoring opportunities, and the ability to keep producing when the defense knows you're the player they have to stop. Once a scorer gets hot, defenses adjust. They bring extra attention, change assignments, and try to force the player away from comfortable spots. But elite scorers find another answer. Take away the three, and Clark can attack. Pressure the ball, and she can create separation. Collapse on her, and she can find a teammate. Give her space, and she can make you pay. That combination is what makes her offensive game so dangerous. Now, let's address the headline. Caitlin Clark brutally humbles DIJONAI Carrington. It sounds dramatic, but basketball isn't that simple. Scoring 37 points doesn't automatically mean another player was humiliated. Carrington is a professional competing at the highest level, and defensive matchups are part of the sport. The more interesting question is what happens when an elite scorer finds a rhythm against aggressive defense. Clark wasn't necessarily trying to prove something to Carrington personally. She was trying to win, and that distinction matters. The internet loves rivalries and versus narratives, but sometimes the real story is simply that one player had an outstanding offensive night while the opposing defense had to deal with it. As the game progressed, Clark's confidence became increasingly obvious. You can see confidence in the way a player moves, calls for the ball, takes shots without hesitation, and immediately transitions back into defense. Once a shooter gets into that zone, even difficult shots can start looking routine. For Clark, the three-point line has always been a major part of her scoring identity, but she doesn't have to stay behind it. If defenders close out too aggressively, she can attack. If they stay back, she can shoot. If help arrives, she can pass. That creates constant decisions for the defense, and every decision creates another opportunity. That's basketball at its highest level. Just when the Caitlin Clark discussion couldn't get any louder, the NSER controversy entered the conversation. This is where we need to slow down because social media headlines can make separate events appear directly connected when they may not be. Outside commentary can quickly become part of a larger conversation, especially when a major WNBA story is already trending. That's why viewers started asking questions. What was said? Why did it happen? Was there actually a connection to the game? And what exactly did the headline mean? Viral headlines often compress an entire story into a few dramatic words, while the reality can be much more complicated. Think about the ingredients. Caitlin Clark, a huge scoring performance, DIJONAI Carrington, an outspoken former NBA personality, and fans from different sides interpreting the same moment in completely different ways. That's the perfect recipe for viral sports content. One side says Clark proved everyone wrong. Another says it was just one game. Someone focuses on Carrington's defense, while another focuses on Clark's shooting. Suddenly, a basketball game becomes a massive online argument. But that's also a sign of how much attention women's basketball is receiving. Players who might not have generated this level of discussion in the past are now central figures in major sports debates, and Clark is obviously at the center of much of that attention. Here's what often gets lost in the drama. The biggest story isn't whether Clark humbled one opponent. It's that expectations around her have become enormous. A normal player can have a good game, but Clark has a good game, and people immediately ask whether it's the beginning of something bigger. She has a bad game, and people ask what's wrong. She has a great shooting night, and suddenly she becomes the subject of a national debate. Maintaining performance under that kind of spotlight isn't easy because eventually the noise becomes part of the environment. The cheers, criticism, praise, comparisons, and social media arguments. Truly great athletes learn to separate that noise from the game. And we also need to be fair to Carrington. Defenders like her have an extremely difficult job. They're asked to guard elite offensive players while dealing with constant scrutiny. One possession can make them look brilliant, and the next, the offensive player scores. That's basketball. Even the best defenders get beaten. The question is, what happens afterward? Do they adjust, stay aggressive, change their approach, force the scorer into tougher situations? That's the real chess match, and it's far more interesting than simply saying one player destroyed another. Now, let's come back to that number, 37. Numbers don't have emotions, but fans do, and certain numbers become symbols. 37 points tells you something simple. Clark found a way to consistently generate offense. Whether she was shooting from outside, attacking, creating plays, or getting into scoring positions, the defense couldn't completely shut her down. Once that happens, the psychological pressure changes. Defenders have to decide whether to switch, double, chase her off the line, or let someone else beat them. Every choice has a consequence. You're not simply guarding a player, you're trying to solve a problem. And Clark presented a difficult one. Of course, once the game ended, the internet did what it always does. Clips started circulating, fans started debating, some celebrated Clark, others defended Carrington, and the bigger arguments followed. Was Clark proving her critics wrong? Was Carrington receiving too much criticism? Was the matchup becoming bigger than basketball? And what exactly was happening with the NSER controversy? These are the questions that turn a normal game recap into a massive online discussion. But don't let the headline replace the actual story. Watch the basketball, study the possessions, and look at the adjustments. That's where you find the truth. If there's one thing to take away from a performance like this, it's the mentality. Elite players don't survive by focusing entirely on their critics. They focus on the next possession. Miss a shot, next possession. Get pressured, next possession. Turn the ball over, next possession. Someone talks, next possession. That mentality is required at the professional level, and big performances reveal how a player responds when everything around them gets loud. So, who was the real winner here? Caitlin Clark, Carrington, the team, or simply the sport itself? Honestly, the biggest winner may have been women's basketball because people were watching, talking, and debating. People who might not normally follow every WNBA game were suddenly interested. That's powerful because sports grow when people care. And right now, people clearly care about Clark, her opponents, the league, and everything surrounding it. Now comes the most interesting question: what happens after a 37-point explosion? One great game isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning of another test. Defenses now know what Clark is capable of. Opponents can study the film, identify her comfortable spots, and find ways to force difficult decisions. Clark will have to respond. That's what separates a great performance from sustained greatness. Can she do it again? Can she adjust when defenses adjust? Can she remain efficient when opponents build their entire game plan around stopping her? So, was Caitlin Clark's 37-point performance a brutal humbling of DIJONAI Carrington? That's up for fans to debate. But one thing isn't really debatable. 37 points is a statement. Whether you love Clark's game, criticize it, or simply enjoy the competition, performances like this are impossible to ignore. The Carrington storyline added another layer. The NSER controversy brought even more attention, and social media turned everything into a much bigger conversation. But underneath all the headlines and viral clips, there was a player found her rhythm, a defense tried to respond, and millions watched to see what would happen next. And that's exactly why this story isn't over. If Caitlin Clark can continue producing performances at this level, the next game won't just be another game. It'll be another test, another matchup, and another opportunity for the basketball world to start talking again. What do you think? Was this simply an incredible scoring performance, or did Caitlin Clark send a real message to the entire league? Let me know your take in the comments, and if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you subscribe because the next chapter could be even bigger. Still basketball.